Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. Today is July 4th and I wanted to wish a happy Independence Day to all the American viewers of the channel. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to share something with all of you that I came across while trying to do research for a video idea where I wanted to have a look and see how the internet may have been received by certain governments and people around the world at that time, back in the early 90s. And I came across something that I found extraordinary. It was a paper entitled A Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, published in 1996, a full 220 years after the Declaration of Independence for the United States. Now, this paper was written by a man named John Perry Barlow. He was a stark advocate for the internet and ensuring that governments would basically stay out of it. He believed that people should be able to interact with whoever they chose anywhere in the world without any government being able to get in the way. This is something that was not possible prior to the internet. Now, I'm going to play a clip for you of John Perry Barlow himself reading this paper in 2014, roughly 18 years after it was originally published. And while listening to this, remember that this was written a full 15 years prior to Satoshi Nakamoto publishing the Bitcoin white paper. The things that he discusses in this paper sound just like all the issues and all the things that Bitcoin has been fighting to provide to the people of the world. It's a technology that has been sought out for many years. So clearly there is a great need for it. But as I said, this paper, this Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, was written many years prior to Bitcoin becoming reality. I'd say long before it had even been conceived, but people had definitely realized that potential was there. Men like Milton Friedman predicted the existence of Bitcoin one day back in 1999.
So that I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash, a method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A. The way in which I can take a $20 bill and hand it over to you, and there's no record of where it came from. And you may get that without knowing who I am. That kind of thing will develop on the internet, and that will make it even easier for people to use the internet. Of course, it has its negative side. It means that the gangsters, the people who are engaged in illegal transactions will also have an easier way to carry on their business.
But getting back to John Perry Barlow, here is the entire clip. I'm not going to cut into it or anything. I'm just going to play the entire thing straight through the way it was meant to be heard, and then I'll share some of my thoughts at the end.
A Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, as written by John Perry Barlow at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, on February 8th, 1996. Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. We have no elected government, nor are we likely to have one, so I address you with no greater authority than that with which liberty itself always speaks. I declare the global social space we are building to be naturally independent of the tyrannies you seek to impose on us. You have no moral right to rule us, nor do you possess any methods of enforcement we have true reason to fear. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. You have neither solicited nor received ours. We did not invite you, You do not know us, nor do you know our world. Cyberspace does not lie within your borders. Do not think that you can build it as though it were a public works project. You cannot. It is an act of nature, and it grows itself through our collective actions. You have not engaged in our great and gathering conversation, nor did you create the wealth of our marketplaces. You do not know our culture, our ethics, or the unwritten codes that already provide our society more order than could be obtained by any of your external impositions. You claim there are problems among us that you need to solve. You use this claim as an excuse to invade our precincts. Many of these problems don't exist. Where there are real conflicts, where there are wrongs, we will identify them and address them by our means. We are forming our own social contract. This governance will arise according to the conditions of our world, not yours. Our world is different. Cyberspace consists of transactions, relationships, and thought itself, arrayed like a standing wave in the web of our communications. Ours is a world that is both everywhere and nowhere. But it is not where bodies live. We are creating a world that all may enter without privilege or prejudice accorded by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth. We are creating a world where anyone, anywhere, may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. Your legal concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. They are based on matter. There is no matter here. Our identities have no bodies, so unlike you, we cannot obtain order by physical coercion. We believe that from ethics, enlightened self-interest, and the common weal, our governance will emerge. Our identities may be distributed across many of your jurisdictions. The only law that all of our constituent cultures would generally recognize is the Golden Rule. We hope we will be able to build our particular solutions on that basis. But we cannot accept the solutions you are attempting to impose. In the United States, you have today created a law, the Telecommunications Reform Act, which repudiates your own Constitution and insults the dreams of Jefferson, Washington, Mill, Madison, de Tocqueville, and Brandeis. These dreams must now be born anew in us. You are terrified of your own children, since they are natives in a world where you will always be immigrants. Because you fear them, you entrust your bureaucracies with the parental responsibilities you are too cowardly to confront yourselves. In our world, all the sentiments and expressions of humanity, from the debasing to the angelic, are parts of a seamless whole, the global conversation of bits. We cannot separate the air that chokes from the air upon which wings beat. In China, Germany, France, Russia, Singapore, Italy, and the United States, you are trying to ward off the virus of liberty by erecting guard posts at the frontiers of cyberspace. These may keep out the contagion for a small time, but they will not work in a world that will soon be blanketed with bit-bearing media. Your increasingly obsolete information industries would perpetuate themselves by proposing laws in America and elsewhere that claim to own speech itself throughout the world. These laws would declare ideas to be another industrial product no more noble than pig iron. In our world, whatever the human mind may create can be reproduced and distributed infinitely at no cost. The global conveyance of thought no longer requires your factories to accomplish. These increasingly hostile and colonial measures place us in the same position as those previous lovers of freedom and self-determination who had to reject the authorities of distant, uninformed powers. We must declare our virtual selves immune to your sovereignty, even as we continue to consent to your rule over our bodies. We will spread ourselves across the planet so that no one can arrest our thoughts. We will create a civilization of the mind in cyberspace. May it be more humane and fair than the world your governments have made before. Davos, Switzerland, February 8th, 1996, and read in New York City, July 30th, 2013.
In case you weren't aware, the internet was very different from anything the world had seen before. It changed the rules. If you weren't alive prior to the internet, it might seem like something you take for granted. The fact that you can connect yourself with anyone else anywhere in the world with such ease. And not only that, but express yourself in ways that were never possible before. The fact that you're watching this right now is evidence of that. The fact that someone like myself can sit in his garage, make a video, and share it with anybody who wants to watch it. Now, having said that, we still live in a world where intermediaries like YouTube have to stand in the middle. An intermediary who, one might argue, has too much power in this transaction. But we're looking at a future where one day soon, that will no longer be how it works. And this is what a true open, decentralized, censorship-resistant system would function. And it's actually the way the human race used to transact with one another before we had all these trusted third parties. The last 100 years or so is the anomaly, but the technology hasn't caught up with us until now. Bitcoin is what makes this Declaration of Independence possible, and it is a force that cannot be stopped. As he said in his video, it is an act of nature.
It is an act of nature, and it grows itself through our collective actions.
It's our fundamental state. I've said it before that Bitcoin operates under principles based on human nature. The consensus mechanisms and incentives all feed on that. Its security is reinforced by nature. He also mentioned how governments of the world will look at this technology, cyberspace, Bitcoin, it's all the same. They will look at this and say, there are problems among you that we need to fix. They did it with the internet, and they will do it again with Bitcoin. And just like the internet, they will fail. They have no jurisdiction. Now, just like the internet, they will have jurisdiction over our individual bodies in the places where we reside. But sooner or later, they'll begin to realize that imposing certain restrictions on this technology will only harm them, because in doing so, they will simply open the door for other countries to embrace it, which will happen. This is what I mean when I say the game theory behind Bitcoin works on every level, whether that party is an individual or it is a government. The game theory works on all levels. While governments may not like certain aspects of it because they're not used to relinquishing that level of control that they've enjoyed for so long. But it's not the level of control they've always had. You have to go back a few generations before you can experience that again. But the difference is now it's on a worldwide scale. This is why all of this is important, and this is why it will succeed. But it's not going to happen without a fight. I don't know in what form that fight will come or when it will come, but I do believe that eventually this technology will win out. It will win out simply because its fundamentals are reinforced by nature itself. And just like the internet, the governments of the world who embrace it the most and the soonest will benefit the most. And sooner or later, they're going to figure this out. Now, on a somewhat sadder note, I should point out that this man, John Perry Barlow, passed away in his sleep on February 7th, 2018. He was 70 years old. And if any of you are wondering, was he a fan of Bitcoin? Of course he was. And yes, he was involved in the community. But it's things like this where you can start to understand why there are so many people that feel so passionately about it. To the point where, to the untrained eye from the outside looking in, it can almost seem cultish. And I understand that. I can see how people could get that impression. The point is, everybody gets to engage with these types of things in their own way. The way I see it is, no matter what any individual does, it doesn't matter. This is a force of nature. And under those laws, success is all but inevitable. Now, I'm going to leave a link in the description to the document for this speech. I highly recommend maybe going back, watching the video again, read along, or simply just reflect on what's being said in that speech. There are a lot of layers to it. And as I said before, to all the Americans watching the channel, thank you for your support, and I wish you all a happy Independence Day. That's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.